Hello, good afternoon. First of all, let me say, Colleen, how much I did enjoy your bumper stickers. I'd love to get one of those. And to Joe, Holly, when I used to go to Houston, where's Joe? Where'd he go? Is he still there? He is. When I used to go to Houston, I used to have a joke. I would start off by saying, you know, it's great to be here in Houston. San Antonio and Houston have so much in common. We're both big cities in Texas. We're both more humid than any place on earth should be. And both of us wish that we had a big league football team. And finally, the folks are getting the Texans suck. Hey, y'all. So I'm Julián, not Joaquin. I know a lot of y'all, I get asked like 20 times a day, which one are you? I feel like I need a name tag. But I wanted to tell you a little bit about this book that I just finished writing that Little Brown published on October 16th. I feel like a walking cliche these days because I'm about to make a decision about my future in politics, and they say that, you know, people that are going to run for a higher office always put out a book. But I promise you, this was not the intended timing. All right, I started this thing when I was mayor of our city in 2013. And I worked on it, and then I got a call from President Obama in the spring of 2014 asking if I'd be interested in joining the cabinet. And as y'all remember, I went up to serve as Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. And after I had told the president yes, the ethics lawyers told me that I couldn't work on the book while I was a cabinet member, because apparently, as a cabinet member, you can't do anything else that is income producing, which I kind of laugh at these days. But so I put it aside and picked it back up when I got back to San Antonio, and it just came out about a month ago. And so it was always intended, this book, for those of y'all who have read it or if you're going to read it, was always intended as a story about my family's journey in the United States. My grandmother arrived in San Antonio in 1922 when she was 7 years old, and she came here with her younger sister because their parents had passed away in Mexico, and the nearest relatives that they had lived here in San Antonio. And so they went down to Mexico and got them and brought them through Eagle Pass, Texas, and they ended up on the west side of the city. My grandmother never got a formal education. She got yanked out of school when she was still in 3rd or 4th grade. And because of that, she worked as a maid, a cook, and a babysitter for her entire career. And she raised my mother as a single parent. And my mother raised my brother and me as a single parent after my parents split up when we were 8. And so this really was kind of my family's American dream story. But the other part of it relates to today, and that's the subtitle, which is Waking Up from My American Dream. I start the book off by describing a trip that I made down to McAllen, Texas on Father's Day this year. This was at the beginning of the administration's family separation policy. And I went to go join a protest that some immigration activists were doing at the Ursula Processing Center in McAllen. This is one of the centers where they separate the families. And I talk about in the book that, you know, what we found out in my family was that it wasn't enough to work hard to get ahead and to be able to reach your American dream. It also meant that you had to work to improve your community and the country. My grandmother came to San Antonio, as I said, in 1922 at a time when opportunities for women and for Hispanics were very, very limited, very different from what we have today. And she wasn't very political. In fact, when my brother and I, you know, if we had, I don't know, or my mother really, when we were young, had politics on, my grandmother would want to change the channel. She used to watch telenovelas, and she used to make us watch The Young and the Restless, and One Life to Live, and General Hospital. I still know all the characters and locations of each of those soap operas. I can get back into the storyline because they also have the same actors and actresses still on the show for like 30 years. But my mom, who I know some of y'all in the room know, was the exact opposite. She became a hellraiser in the late 1960s and early 70s, and was part of the Mexican-American civil rights movement, the Chicano movement, and was active on women's empowerment issues, and used to drag us to speeches and rallies. And I remember sitting through these 3-hour-long organizational meetings when my brother and I were growing up. And when I was a teenager, if you had asked me if I ever wanted to get involved in politics, I would have said not just no, but hell no. I thought it was boring. I thought that all people were doing was talking, and that at the end of the day, it really didn't amount to much. But in the book, I talk about how I came to the realization also that there was a role to play in creating for others the kind of opportunity that my brother and I were blessed to have in our lives, to be able to grow up here in the public schools of San Antonio, to graduate from Jefferson High School, and then to go on to college and to law school, to become the first in our family to be professionals as attorneys. Lawyers and politicians might sound like a nightmare to a lot of people, but for our family, it was the classic example of one generation going further than the next. And I wanted to just read two very brief excerpts, because I get a couple of questions all the time. One of those questions is about my mom. And a lot of folks here in the community know her as an activist. Over the years, I think that's how she's been remembered. But of course, I knew her as a mom that was raising us as a single parent and trying to get by, trying to look out for us, and as the person that in my life is most responsible for my success. And so I wanted to read a quick excerpt from the day that we went to orientation for 6th grade in SAISD. We had gone to a Catholic school for 1 year in 5th grade because I think my mom wanted us to have the experience that she had for 16 straight years. She went to Catholic school until she finished Our Lady of the Lake University. We didn't like it, and so we begged her to let us go back to public school in the SAISD, and we lived near Rhodes Middle School, which is, some folks in the room will know, is on the west side of the city. So we're sitting in an auditorium, all of the students that are heading into 6th grade and their parents, and my brother and I are there with my mother. The staff introduced themselves one by one, and after a few speeches about what to expect at Rhodes, one administrator walked up to the mic to wrap it up. "I'm here to give every student some advice," he said in a stern voice. "I want y'all to look around the room. Look at the person beside you." He waited for everybody to look around. "Statistically, the chances are that up to half of you won't be here when it's time to graduate from 8th grade. That's what we're dealing with here." Mom straightened up. Joaquin and I recognized this alertness. And it meant one thing. Mom was angry. I'd done well at St. Mary's, almost all A's, except for an F in music, which Mr. Palmady had gotten the music teacher to change to a B. What the administrator was saying made no sense to us. Every kid we knew stayed in school, and we just assumed that we would graduate. Mom had a master's degree, and Dad was a math teacher. When the talk was over, Joaquin and I saw some buddies and walked over to them while Mom waited patiently for us at the back of the auditorium. Our friends gathered and began talking. 7 classrooms instead of 1. My own locker, and football, and girls. Rhodes is going to be so cool, we all agreed. Mom, however, did not agree. "You're not going to Rhodes," she announced the next morning. She didn't tell us why at the time, which was not her usual style. But years later, she shared her reason with us. "I knew what you two could accomplish, and there was no way I was going to put you in a school where they set such low expectations. That was my mother back then. The other quick moment I wanted to share is of the very first day that my brother Joaquin and I got to college. We graduated from Jefferson in 1992 and got on an airplane on Wednesday, September 23rd of that year. I think my dad bought us the cheapest ticket that you can buy on Southwest Airlines because we were going into SFO into San Francisco, but we stopped in El Paso, San Diego, and then San Francisco. We cried like all the way to El Paso. So much so that one of the flight attendants had to bring us those Southwest Airlines napkins, to clean our tears. And because we never had really been away from home. I think I had been on a plane one time before. And then we got there. And on the first day, we checked into our dorms. And then we went to this computer room. Every dorm had a computer room back then in 1992. After settling into our rooms, Joaquin and I explored the new living areas. In a university known for pioneering modern advances, it made sense that the campus incorporated cutting-edge technology. Every dorm had its own computer room with Macintosh desktops and one Next desktop, for those of y'all that may remember what Next was, available to students. Joaquin and I walked into the computer room in my dorm. At Jefferson, we had used clunky, slow PCs and had seen a Mac once in a blue moon. To us, the machine looked like an intergalactic control system. Joaquin needed to set up his email account, so he sat down at a terminal and he hit the keyboard. Nothing happened. He picked it up and looked to see if it was plugged in. It was, and he fumbled around hitting the option and control keys and just making a symphony of error beeps. Then he saw a small white gadget tethered to the computer by a cord and sitting atop a black foam pad. We thought it was some sort of presentation aspect of the computer, and Joaquin didn't know what to do with it. He flipped it over and noticed a little plastic gray ball in the center. He rolled it with his finger. "Oh, look," I said, pointing to the cursor on the computer screen. Joaquin tried to navigate it toward the line he needed to type on, but it just jerked around erratically. A student across the table was looking at us curiously. From a technological standpoint, we were like cavemen. "You have to turn it over," he said, "like this." He pointed his mouse, sitting white side up on the black pad. We looked at him and then back at our mouse as if it were a Rubik's Cube. Ours was like a flipped turtle, rocking back and forth as we flicked the gray ball, continually tipping it to one side. "Slide it on the pad," another student yelled. How to use a mouse. My first lesson at Stanford. I talk about in the book that there's so many challenges that we have today, and one of them is in education. And the little ways that we found out along the way, the differences, the different experiences that you get, and the challenges that our young people have today because of those different experiences. And I'm proud of this book. I hope that you'll have an opportunity to pick it up. And I think that, especially these days, when in so many ways it feels like we're going backward instead of forward, that we all need to tell our stories of how it is that we came to be where we are now, and how we can help others to do the same. Let me just say to Dr. Henrich, to Dr. Mesa, to Dr. Grissom, to the Express News, thank you all very much for doing this, for giving me the opportunity to be here. Dr. Henrich may remember, because I became mayor in 2009. When I was mayor, I used to say that I consider the city a servant of our universities. And that's because not only do you further knowledge, but also, in the case of UT Health, you heal people. You make our community better and greater. Gracias. Thank you very much.